Welcome back to the World Energy Council World Energy Week. I'm John Defterios in London, where it's 14:21 past the hour, 19:21 in Nur-Sultan, the capital of Kazakhstan, and 9:21 in the morning in New York. We'll be going a little bit later in our next session. This is a very special plenary session coming up for you, highlighting the road to Congress 2022 and an exciting run-up to the 25th World Energy Congress in St. Petersburg next year at this time. We will be on the ground, and we hope you will be there as well. It will mark the centenary of the World Energy Council, this most prestigious and influential global event, hosting leaders, of course, from all around the world at this critical juncture of the energy transition. Think of where we are today with oil prices above $80 a barrel, the surge in gas prices, gas shortages within the European Union and other pockets around the world, and at the same time looking forward to COP26. The theme for the 25th World Energy Congress is Energy for Humanity, and that's what we're focusing on today, achieving abundance in a world of scarcity. This is part of that missing equation when they have the debate about energy here. How do you deliver energy around the world and keep onto your climate targets? 3 billion people with not having access to energy at all times, 750 million that don't have access to this luxury, if you will, to be able to turn on a light switch or their cooker to make food. It's an incredibly important topic, and I think it's the missing link, if I can be candid here, when we talk about the energy transition. How about energy poverty at the same time? Let me welcome our distinguished panelists. We have an hour here for the discussion, and we want to have your contributions. I'll get to that in just a moment. Let's welcome Bob Dudley. He's the former CEO, of course, of BP and sits on the board of directors for Rosneft. It's good to see him. Maria Suner-Fleming is the Chief Executive Officer of the Swedish Association of Mines, Mineral and Metal Producers. She's joining us from Sweden. Nice to see you, Maria. Maria van der Hoeven, former Executive Director of the International Energy Agency and also a Senior Advisor to the World Energy Council, Secretary General for Literacy, which is part of this debate here about humanizing energy. And from Chile, His Excellency Juan Jobet, the Minister of Energy for the government of Chile, a major strategic producer of minerals, but also the flag bearer for the energy transition on the continent in Latin America. We want to just remind you that you can join us in the debate here on social media by using the hashtag humanizing energy. That's humanizing energy. And also hashtag World Energy Week. We're taking your questions from the floor. They're going to be fed to me on a WhatsApp chat group here. It's functioning with no kind of interruptions that we've seen in the last 48 hours. So we welcome that debate. We'll do 30 minutes of the roundtable here with our special guests and then take the questions from you from all corners of the world. And I have an overarching theme I'd like to present to the panel here, and that is what steps are leaders taking to promote meaningful access to energy, but at the same time, I'll add the caveat, still trying to make sure we have our sights focused on COP26 and the Paris Agreement and hitting these targets that are out there. Let's start with Bob Dudley. Bob, do you think this is a balanced equation in the world today? I think, if I could be candid, that the energy poverty is often very much overlooked. Your thoughts?
Good to see you, John, and hello to the panel members and everyone who's watching today. And one of the things I also do, John, by the way, is I chair the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative, which was set up in 2015, 12 of the big energy companies around the world, and we're working on a lot of these problems and created $1 billion fund to invest in new clean technologies. But what you say is absolutely right, and there's so many examples of countries around the world, which is really, can we, I think in this world, can we have clean energy and meet the climate goals too? And I think this need to balance the needs for reliable energy today and the economic engines of the developing world with climate imperatives there. And the world must, I think, accept, and I think most people do, that each country and oftentimes regions within countries individually, their energy transitions are starting at a different point. You mentioned 750 million people without access to electricity, and unbelievable shortage of people not having access to even clean cooking fuels that are burning wood and cow dung in where they live. The health issues around that. There's just so much that we've got to make sure this transition brings everyone along. So I do think these technologies around CCUS, but natural gas in particular, is going to be so vital to be able to make this transition work in many parts of the world. You've got to get it into the heartlands of Africa. You need to displace coal, most certainly. India is another good example. So the short answer, I think, to what you're getting at is yes, we can balance these needs, and net zero is real, but it's going to be at different paces in different geographies.
Yeah, that's the challenge, the different paces that you're talking about. Let's bring in our two Marias first, and then I'll round up the first peppering of questions with His Excellency the Minister. But Maria van der Hoeven, I wanted to talk to you about energy for humanity. I mean, this ties into what Bob was saying. How do you define that? Because again, we often say, okay, energy companies are repackaging themselves. They're international energy companies, not IOCs. We need to move out of coal. The role of natural gas that Bob was talking about. Oil prices at $80 a barrel. But we leave what the consumer is faced with. How do we humanize it in your view?
That's great. Well, in my view, affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all is just absolutely necessary. And that means for me that without access to this clean, modern energy, it's impossible to achieve the SDGs. It's possible to reduce poverty. It's impossible to enhance economic development. It's impossible to address climate change, broaden education, and improve public health. So there are many more issues that go together with this humanizing energy. It is the most important thing is putting people at the heart of clean energy transition, because that is what we are talking about. We are talking about people. And that brings me to my remark and my reaction to what Bob just said. Is clean power enough? I don't think so, because it cannot provide all demands in regions and the undergoing rapid urbanization, industrialization. When you look at Africa, gas is relevant for transition and for economic development, employment, and also to avoid a huge migration issue. So I fully agree with him that in other words, a just transition, and those are the words that are often being used, a just transition means different pathways for different regions, is engineered differently in different regions, and it goes at different paces. So there are more than one way to achieve the Paris goals, and innovation, scaling up new solutions is crucial. And for me, prescribing a certain pathway doesn't help at all. It doesn't do justice to regional differences. It doesn't do justice to people. And if you really want people to be put into the center of energy transformation, this is exactly what we do, except that in different regions, different pathways lead to the same goal.
Okay, thanks a lot. I'm going to circle back a little bit later, Maria van der Hoeven, on this idea, though, if you have different speeds, you could have countries use as an excuse of, I'll go slower because I have great access to coal, as Bob Dudley was saying, or oil and gas, and I want to use those resources if they're cost effective for me. So there is that sort of threat that we have. Let's bring in Maria Suner-Fleming from Sweden here, looking at strategic minerals, strategic metals, the need for energy to produce steel and aluminium or aluminum around the world. Maria, again, when I say humanizing energy, I think most people around the world, those particularly suffering from energy poverty, but the average consumer in Europe, the United States, or Far East Asia, wouldn't know how complex the energy transition is and how dependent we are on strategic resources.
No, I think you're absolutely right. The energy transition and to reach actually the climate goals and I mean the climate issue has been underlined by the latest IPCC report, and it shows clearly that we need to shift away from emitting carbon dioxide in all different ways. And what we see right now is that the process around electrification and the shift to for example, electrical vehicles within the transport system and renewable energy will demand more metals and minerals in the society. And the increase is quite immense, especially if you look at certain metals and minerals, given the technologies that we know of today. I mean, for example, you will have a 100-fold need for minerals like lithium, cobalt, graphite, rare earth elements, etc., but also basic metals like copper and steel. So the need for metals and mineral will increase a lot in the world. And we also see a clear connection between actually higher climate ambitions and an even more increased need. So there is a clear connection also in the speed of the climate transition. If we have a higher speed and higher targets, the need will increase even more. A lot of people also talk about the possibilities of recycling. And of course, recycling is extremely important. And metals are very well suited to recycle as well. But that won't be enough in the short run. So we will see a clear grow in the need for metals and minerals in the future. But we also, as you said here, we need to look at the whole value chain. How do we decarbonize and make the whole value chains sustainable? Mining has to be sustainable in the future and fossil free in order to achieve for example, the fossil free windmill, the fossil free and the sustainable car produced. So we have a lot to do also in the area around mining in order to humanize the energy transition.
Excellent point. And again, you've underscored a few topics I'd love to come back to here in the next 45 minutes. Let's bring in Juan Carlos Jobet, the Minister of Energy, joining us from Chile. Minister Jobet, I'd love to talk to you about where Maria left off there from Sweden about the strategic minerals. You're a major copper producer, so let's start there. How does Chile see its role here in copper production, perhaps other strategic minerals which will help accelerate the transition and electrification? Do you see yourself as a major player? And we can talk about your diversification strategy thereafter.
Yes, well, thank you so much for this opportunity. Hello, everyone. It's good morning here, good afternoon there.
Exactly.
So minerals will be critical, as Maria said, to the energy transition, right? Without minerals, that's the truth, we will not be able to stop climate change. I mean, it's that simple, right? As Maria said, we will need increasing amounts of copper, lithium, and other minerals to navigate the energy transition, right? Renewable sources of energy require, for example, 4 times more copper than conventional sources of energy, right? And the same is true for electric vehicles, right? So without mining, we won't be able to do this. That is very important to say because some people in Chile, and I think this is true in other countries as well, follow the following logic path that I don't think it's true, but they say, I mean, the environment is hurting, right, because of climate change. Mining operations used to or usually hurt the environment. Therefore, we need to stop mining to protect the environment. And that logic is completely flawed in my perspective. We need more minerals to accelerate the energy transition. Actually, the International Energy Agency is very concerned, as are many other players, that the access to critical minerals could be one of the biggest challenges to accelerate the transition, right? So what we need to do first, I think, is to make this case more loudly, to make sure that the broader population understands that mining is essential to take care of the environment. Right? And the second thing that is essential that mining companies do with the support and with the push of governments is to clean their own operations, right? If mining will supply the minerals required to stop climate change, then the operations of miners themselves must have a very low carbon footprint. So they need to replace PPAs based on coal, for example, with renewables. And that's what they're doing in Chile. They need to use smaller amounts of fresh water, using more desalinated water. They need to replace diesel in their trucks with green hydrogen or batteries and so on, right? So they need to clean their own operations. That's what we're trying to do in Chile. This is a big industry, it has inertia. It's not that easy to change from one day to the other, but I think they see that they need to change in order to get the legitimacy that they require to supply the minerals that we will need, right? So for us, it's an essential agenda in the following years.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to pose a question as if I have this table in front of me sitting in London and I have you in all corners of the world, literally. The big elephant in the room is that the pricing that we're seeing for oil right now, around $80 a barrel. We've seen what's happened to natural gas prices. We have delivery problems within the European space, but it's a challenge in every corner of the world. And I'd like to have you pick out a strand on this topic in particular, because again, this is humanizing energy. People are coming out of the pandemic, struggling in terms of their jobs and getting higher wages, and then are faced with higher energy bills within their homes, also higher prices at the pump or for petrol and the rest. So Bob Dudley, I think you're the best place to start because BP was on this mission of the energy transition. Is this the space in between where there's high demand in the COVID-19 pandemic and underinvestment in hydrocarbons, and that's why we're seeing the squeeze, or is there something else behind it?
Well, thanks, John. I think you pick a thread out of this, and it probably applies to the entire energy transition. I think part of this is going to be managing the unintended consequences of transitioning so fast that the recognition that the world will need all forms of energy for quite a while to manage it. And I think there has been uninvestment as well. It's part of the issue here, completely a surprise, but it shows why if we go too fast in these things, you'll end up with distortions in the economy. Things will cost too much. Natural gas provides fertilizer. And we're short of natural gas now. It's real. I think it's temporary, but it could be a little bit of a winter of discontent around the world. Power shortages in China and in India. Higher costs of those materials will now result, and that means that the whole supply chain related to the energy transition will happen. So renewable energy could limit the growth, as we said about minerals, clean energy. Ironically, things like solar panel, the manufacturing of it. Cost of solar is going to go up now. Mineral prices are going up. It's all through the supply chain. So I think that thread would be, John, maybe what trade-offs are we willing to make, and who gets to make those trade-offs, and how does the market signals to make sure we have the energy to be able to make the transition? I think there are distortions. I don't believe this is the climate action and the climate move, other than maybe there's been some uninvestment in the traditional energy sources.
Okay, very good. I just want to remind our viewers, thanks for that, Bob, that we want to get the questions from you as well, so weigh into the debate, but we have plenty to talk about. We're using the hashtag humanizing energy here at World Energy Week, and also hashtag World Energy Week on Twitter and LinkedIn as well. And Maria van der Hoeven, one of the things I know you're very passionate about is like, how did we handle the COVID-19 pandemic? We saw emissions drop alongside demand, of course, and then we come bursting out of the gates and we have coal shortages in China, gas shortages in Europe. What's the strand that you're taking away from this price equation that we're seeing today, which is putting pressure, again, humanizing energy on the consumer?
It's not the first time that this happens, John. It happened also in the early 70s where we had the first oil crisis, and then we had the founding of the IEA, the combination of a number of OECD countries to see to it that it would never happen again. And that's when we started to build storages, etc. I think now with the COVID-19 crisis, I think what happened there, especially in the use of energy and the demand for energy, was thought to be forever. And that's not the case. What we can see now that there are many economic activities coming back again, and these require energy. And that shows that the COVID-19 crisis has really exposed this greater unevenness in energy access. And we have seen in the context of affordability, debt serving costs, energy justice matters are emerging in all geographies. So in that light, financing clean energy transition in emerging and developing economies proves to be much more different than it looks like. And I think we really have to continue with that, because if we are not doing that, we are leaving people behind. And that's something that everybody agrees on. We should not leave people behind, because that gives only a number of other problems, and then people don't believe anymore in this energy transformation that really needs to be done between now and 2050. So looking for new financial agreements, looking for new financial arrangements, I think is absolutely necessary to do something about not about COVID-19, but about the shortage of energy at this moment. Okay. And that includes, of course, going on with developing clean energy sources, renewables, and the whole system that goes with it. It's not just about producing renewable energy. It's also how to get it to the people and see to it that the people really profit from it.
Yeah, in fact, people are demanding the renewable energy and their expectations of how fast it can get to the market, or even having, as consumers, that choice that you're talking about, Maria. Let's bring in Minister Jobet from Chile. And I saw in the August period, and this is a struggle all around the world, Minister, inflation of 4.8%. You've had to raise interest rates to kind of try to cap inflation. This is a struggle right now. So I would imagine, as a developing country that is the flag bearer for the energy transition in South America, and at the same time have plans to provide new innovations, isn't this the present danger that you're faced with right now? High energy prices, squeezing consumers, and pushing up inflation. Isn't that the reality?
Well, that's a great question. The system we have in Chile, it's built in a way, I don't want to get into the details, but the consumers, residential consumers, are protected against changes in the short term in prices, right? So they are not suffering the increase in international prices. But that is, for a while, right? If this is a sustained rally of prices, that could hurt consumers. I think that is a good device we have in place to protect consumers. But it's very important that we assure access to affordable energy for all in the long run. And not just because it's the right thing to do, to help those families and those people get a good quality of life. But I think it's essential to build the legitimacy for the energy transition, right? For companies and for governments to have room to devote time and effort to the most sophisticated issues like the intermittency of renewables, how do we develop storage, how do we accelerate green hydrogen. We will not have room to devote time and effort to those issues that are very important if we have not solved before basic access, stable and reliable prices, and two sources of energy that are clean and safe for everyone, right? So even though that sometimes look like an issue that is completely disconnected with the energy transition and the climate agenda, I think it's essential to take care of it, not only because it's the right thing to do, because if we don't do that, that could help our capacity to accelerate the energy transition. So I think those two go actually very, very much hand in hand.
Very good. Thanks, Minister. I want to follow up quickly with you, though. Are the industry players in Chile, for example, or in South America, demanding clarity of policy so they can plan for the future themselves on investment, Minister?
Yes, that is essential. As you know, these are very capital-intensive investments that need to amortize their investment in the long run. So the stability of the rules is essential. I think part of our success in Chile in this energy transition is that we have unique natural resources, but also that we have an environment, a business environment that is stable with clear rules. And I think investors value that. And that is why they are investing very aggressively in our country. But that is something that we need to take care of every single day, right? Because things are moving, especially in an economic crisis after COVID, after the social unrest we had in our country in the last couple of years. That has been the top priority of our list of tasks we're dealing with. I think it's very, very important, not only in Chile, but in the whole region.
Right. In fact, I think the consumer, whether it's in Chile or anywhere else around the world, is much more vocal than they would have been before, partially because of social media, partially because of the electronic media all around the world. They can see what's taking place outside their borders at the same time. Maria Suner-Fleming, I'd love to talk to you about how do you define what we're faced with right now when it comes to the strategic minerals or metals that is your specialty. Is it a super cycle or just a spike in the flow chart in your view?
No, I think it's a super cycle, because I have a problem seeing how we could actually do the energy transition without access to these metals and minerals. And I think it was the chief executive of IEA who said, when they presented a report this spring, that there is a looming mismatch between the climate ambitions and the access to these important minerals for the energy transition. And we see that what we know about the coming production on these essential metals and minerals and the need for it is a great mismatch. So we will need to take more resources into account globally in order to actually achieve this. And of course, energy prices are also important in this, because we see also that the mining sector, and especially with the transition towards more fossil-free production, will be very exposed to energy prices, and especially when more and more mining operations goes towards electrification and using hydrogen produced by electricity. Of course, the energy prices are extremely important in this transition, and also in the possibilities of opening new mines globally. So this is very clearly interconnected, both in the ways of the pricing and the access to electricity and energy, but also the need for metals and minerals for the energy sector. So I think we're extremely intertwined these days, actually.
Well, that's a great point, because I don't think the average consumer knows how intertwined they are. Maria Fleming, just a very quick follow-up then. Do we need to work on the image of the mining sector? A lot of people would look and say, I'm not depending on the mining sector. Why are we affording all this investment into this space? How does it affect me? Is there a rebranding effort that's needed underway, something that we've seen, for example, like a BP making the transition and rebranding itself? Does the sector need that sort of rebranding when it comes to mining and strategic metals?
Yeah, of course, I think so. I mean, the mining sector has a job to do, definitely, both in the way of actually presenting how we are working with sustainability, with actually getting out of fossil fuels, how we take care of local communities, and how we work with biodiversity issues, for example. So this is extremely important. But we also need to get the greater public to understand actually how dependent they are on the mining sector. I usually take the example of the iPhone that actually has 60 minerals in it. So it's 60. That's half of the periodic system if you're a chemist like me. So actually, I mean, you can't have this modern and fossil-free life if you don't have access to minerals in different ways. So it's extremely important that we understand that connection, but also the mining sector need to work on the image, and also to get the message out there that there are solutions on how to become fossil-free in mining, and how to actually work in a sustainable way with local communities, biodiversity, water issues, etc., that are the big issues for the mining sector.
Okay, very good. There's a question that's come in from the audience for Maria Fleming, and then I want to present the whole hydrogen equation to our distinguished panel. But Maria, what is the social responsibility of the companies when sourcing minerals? What if you're a European producer, for example, and you're going to Africa or Latin America for sourcing? What is realistic, transparent CSR when it comes to mining?
Oh, that's a huge question, actually. There is so many dimensions in how to become more socially responsible in that. But I think we need to secure that the raw materials that we use in Europe, for example, or elsewhere as well, are produced as sustainable as possible with respect to human rights, with respect to the climate and other environmental values. So, and this is, of course, a big transition. And I think the issue around actually putting demands, possibilities of traceability when it comes to metals and minerals. I think the market for metals and minerals has been too anonymous to a great extent in history, and that we need to find these ways of actually tracing and tracing these kind of parameters through the value chains. And I hope hope that our end producers, the car manufacturer, the iPhone producers, etc., will put these kind of demands and ask these kind of questions as well, because that will also spare the development of this in the future. So I think this is extremely important.
Okay, you can see our flow chart here, our bubble filling up with the different points that you're all making, and we get a chance to bring those in. For example, the energy shortage, the impact of COVID-19, and that what it meant in terms of the pricing that we see today. We have some more questions coming in, but I did promise I wanted to present the idea of hydrogen. Bob Dudley, you and I have talked about this on different panels, but again, I think this is worth each one of our panelists addressing it with a different thread. You were a big proponent, well before the rest of the industry was talking about it, about the role of natural gas, but then the role of natural gas in blue hydrogen as well. Now we see the push for green hydrogen, but the pricing challenges that are there. Is this truly hydrogen's era that's knocking on the door?
Thanks, John. I think it's the beginning of it. It's a little more complicated, I think, than people think, because one, you have to build out a very, very expensive distribution infrastructure. If you're going to produce hydrogen, say, for, say, a Daimler car, they want to know where the hydrogen is going to be. They're not going to design the car until the hydrogen network is there. So this will take a little bit of time. For your viewers, hydrogen is often called the wonder fuel because it effectively, when you burn it, is water vapor is the emissions. And people are saying, oh, green hydrogen, which you make from electrolysis and power, is good, and blue hydrogen is not, coming off of industrial projects, and then you have gray hydrogen off of power plants. Actually, what we need is the hydrogen. So I'm not a fan of the green versus the blue, because there's a lot of blue hydrogen produced today that can be used. It needs certain incentives and cooperation across sectors of the economy. And the role of natural gas, if you look at the molecule of natural gas, it's 1 carbon atom and 4 hydrogen atoms. So natural gas is a great carrier today, of a stable carrier of hydrogen, and you can move with natural gas to a place and then decarbonize the natural gas and have hydrogen. So there are people in the world that don't want to see or have any more natural gas. And I think that's just one reason why natural gas will have a role related to hydrogen. Of course, natural gas, I think, is essential in the long transition to the energy transition. Okay. Does that get at your question, John?
Yeah, it certainly did, yeah, as I expected. Thanks, Bob, for that. And it brings me back to Maria van der Hoeven. And you talked about this major question, Maria, is clean power enough? And I'd like to see what you think the role of hydrogen is in that question you pose to the world.
Mm-hmm. The point is that hydrogen is often seen as the missing link in the energy transition. And I think there's some truth in it, because hydrogen is something that can be used in many respects. It's not only for seasonal storage, it's clean. And I think it's important to realize that this whole discussion about colors that leads to nothing at all. The only thing that we need to have that is that the hydrogen is certified, and that it's certified in a way that is nationally recognized, so that it really can bring trust and confidence to its users. Because what we have to do, of course, is to speed up demand, to create a market for hydrogen. And let's take care that we are not leaving out the good just because we want to have the best, because that is not how it's going to work. So in my view, it is absolutely necessary to use this part of hydrogen to see to it that there are a number of projects that can now be done are really on the rails. Let me give you one example. Why not, like Germany is promoting, why not produce a lot of renewable energy in Northern Africa and then bring it back here in Western Europe in the form of hydrogen? And it's not a, how should I put it? It's not a fancy, it's something that is really happening. Programs like Desertec are there. And in Europe, where you can see the European Commission wanting to develop a hydrogen economy, well, that means that also from a political view, or from a political standpoint, there is a lot of support for hydrogen. So let's use it, but see to it that it really grows into one of the solutions for a better and cleaner world in 2050.
Thanks very much, Maria. Let's go to Minister Jobet on this. You're developing green hydrogen in your country right now at the early stages. What can you tell us in terms of this effort to push out?
Yes, maybe I think it's worth remembering a couple of basic things about green hydrogen that Bob and Maria touched on. So the essence of the energy transition in Chile and all over the world is to clean our power grids, right, using renewables, to then use that clean and cheap electricity all over the economy, in transportation, industries, and so, our houses, and so on. But that plan has one problem, right? That there are certain areas that are very hard to electrify, around 20% of the energy demand. And that's where hydrogen, most people agree, will play an essential role, right? That's why it's so important. Now, to do that, we need to develop a lot of renewable energy. We have in Chile the capacity to develop 80 times more renewable electricity generation than we will use locally, right? So hydrogen is the best way for us to harvest that solar irradiance and that wind in Patagonia to then export that renewable resources to the world, right? It's an energy vector. So we're making very good progress. We have already more than 60 projects of green hydrogen and its derivatives, green ammonia, sync fuels, and methanol and others under development. Many international companies are investing in Chile. And we think that we will be able to produce the cheapest green hydrogen on the planet. That's what we're aiming for, because we have unique renewable resources. And we think it's going to play a very essential role locally as well. I mean, our numbers show that we will contribute with around 20% of the CO2 reductions we need to be carbon neutral by 2050. So it's going to help us clean our own economy and then share those resources in excess that we have with the rest of the world. So we're making very good progress. But as Bob said at the beginning, we still have hurdles to overcome. Logistics is one of them, but we think technology will be there on time. That's what we're working for.
Okay, Minister, thanks for that. Juan Carlos Jobet joining us from Chile. I just want to remind, before I bring Marina Fleming back into the conversation on hydrogen, that in just over 30 minutes' time, we're going to have a whole session on decarbonizing the Latin America reality. That's a challenge here. How do you decarbonize the fuel system or the energy value chain, as I was talking before? That'll be taking place in 30 minutes if you have a deep interest in that continent, which many people do as we watch that transition. Maria Suner-Fleming, give us an inkling of the innovation that's taking place when it comes to metal production, steel, aluminium, and the rest. Is hydrogen a real option today? What's in the value chain?
It's definitely a real option, and we see a lot here in Sweden. We have several projects in making fossil-free steel, which has its basis in the hydrogen technology, to use fossil-free electricity and to produce hydrogen to use as a raw material into the process. And these investments are actually happening right now. So I would say what we see in the forecasts for Sweden, we see an almost 50% increase in the electricity use in Sweden in the perspective to 2040 in order to actually produce hydrogen. So the increased use of electricity will be mainly based on the production of hydrogen for industrial processes. And I guess we are quite lucky in Sweden. We already have a more or less fossil-free electricity based on hydropower and nuclear, but also with a lot of wind power. But we will see a great increase in the renewable electricity towards that perspective. So it is really interesting that we are actually seeing this shift. And also one of our biggest mining company, steel or iron ore producer, they are also shifting towards the hydrogen technology in their end product to produce sponge iron instead of the predecessing steps. So the shift is immense here in Sweden right now when it comes to these technologies.
Fascinating to listen to. We have a lot of questions coming in. We appreciate that. People are using the hashtag humanizing energy. And of course, this is World Energy Week. We're using a hashtag as well. This is a question from the Secretary General of the World Energy Council. And in fact, she's provided two. But I think this is a very important one as we see the cloud here filling up. How can we better involve and mobilize the missing middle, the middle classes in cities and communities, small and medium-sized enterprises, and avoid a cop-out by the silent majority? This is a vital question. Let's go to Maria van der Hoeven first, and then Minister Jobet.
Well, you know, John, this really is a vital question, because what we can see at this moment, that is that customer-centered energy services are emerging in the developed and in the developing world. And humanizing energy recognizes the challenge of mobilizing what Angela calls the middle. And that means mid-scale energy transition, financial models and frameworks, regional groupings of smaller states, cities and communities. And it is really a huge issue, because energy transition will bring changes in the whole world, in people's way of life, in workforce transition, in skills diversification, education, behavior, employment. And they are all important. They all affect people everywhere because of this energy transition. So humanizing energy is for me also something about energy literacy. See to it that you create a momentum of change via collaboration, and meaning how to tackle this challenge, energy, this literacy, what could be done by WEC, for instance, in addition to what others are doing. And there, in my view, there we have the World Energy Academies involving future energy professionals and equipping them with systemic leadership intervention champions, rather than equipping them as traditional roles of engineers and researchers, because thinkers and makers in convening and growing new energy societies, that is what we are talking about. And what we see is worldwide energy transformations. So agile learning, agile action learning sprints involving people, involving cities and diverse communities in making this energy transition. And for me, I have to admit, there needs to be a special focus on youth, on young people, because they are agents of change. They are demanding tomorrow's energy and they are the leaders of tomorrow. So why not see to it that you promote public information about new and responsible ways of using energy, an open digital platform in energy use and behaviors. And these are things I think that are extremely important in the next years to come. And so why not see to it that this is going to happen? And that is also an aspect of humanizing energy, using this middle force, as I put it like that, this mid-scale energy transition, and involve people to be part of it, to be active in this. So this is something I would like to see in the future, and it's not going to be easy, and maybe it's too optimistic. I agree with that. But on the other hand, if you don't start it, nobody will do it, and it's extremely important to see to it that people will keep. How shall I put it, will keep in touch with energy transition, and that no one is being left behind. So this is very crucial, I think.
It certainly is. One would say we'd have to accelerate it. We've been a little bit late to the party with the climate crisis that's at hand. Mr. Jobet, I wanted you to address the middle class, but let me pose this second half of the questions. That I have so many questions coming in. We have about 18 minutes left before we finish here. What is the most perverse and pervasive myth about energy transition that needs to be busted? Take the Chilean example. And what is the role of the middle class, Minister?
Well, I think that's a great question. I don't know what is the most challenging issue we need to deal with, but I think one of the issues I deal with every day is that I think middle class in Chile, and I think this is true in other countries as well, is increasingly empowered. They have this sense of entitlement, right? They care about the climate. They care about the future of their children and their grandchildren and so on. But sometimes they tend to put the blame on companies and governments, right? When the reality is that it's all of us who consume energy. It's all of us that ride our cars. It's all of us who heat our houses, right? So it's all of us who can make a difference to try to solve this problem. I'm not saying that companies and governments shouldn't be leading this. I think we should. But people on their everyday lives can make a difference. So a couple of examples. Energy efficiency. I mean, we can all, go ahead with our lives without, deteriorating our quality of life using less energy. That's pretty simple to do, but people do not translate their concern about the future into changes in their day-to-day habits. And I think that's an area in which we can all do much more than what we do. And the other thing that we are trying to do is to make the energy transition more tangible for people, right? Because if you are a housewife and you turn on the lights, you don't know if it was generated with coal, natural gas, or solar, right? So it doesn't make a difference. But if you have distributed solar panels, for example, people will see it, will touch it, and it's going to make it more tangible and make them involved to make a difference. I think that is very important.
Yeah, it's the missing link in the chain, Minister. It's a fantastic point you're making here. This is a question from Andrew in the Netherlands, joining us here for World Energy Week. And he asked for a very blunt answer. So let's go to Bob Dudley to start with. In one short sentence, what does energy for humanity mean to you, Mr. Dudley? You're the CEO of an energy company before, active in the sector for what, better than 4 decades. What do you think that is in 2021, Bob?
Well, I think we've got to drive the transition to make energy available for all, and it has to be affordable. It is going to be more expensive around the world, but we've got to somehow not put on, as we said earlier, one-size-fit-all solutions and take this very locally and then drive it. Places are going to need support. That's more than one sentence.
Yeah, that's okay, though. I appreciate that. Let's get to Maria Fleming's view on this, and this is a question that was brought up when it comes to the myths that are out in the market today. How do you think COVID-19 affected this discussion about humanizing energy, Maria Fleming? Because you're in a very particular sector. Was it a wake-up call that we need to have ample supplies, we have to continue the investment, we can decarbonize, but it's at a cost because people can't move around in the world, they can't grow in the future, we can't have reduction of poverty in the developing world? How do you define it? I think you're muted again, Maria.
I must have put myself on mute.
Yeah, no problem.
No, but that's an interesting question. I mean, I think the mining sector, at least when you look at it here in Sweden and the European scene, has been quite unaffected by the COVID. They have coped with the production and have the demand has continued to be out there. But I think one of the wake-up things with the COVID-19 to the mining sector has been, at least in Europe, a wake up towards having a greater resilience in actually being able to produce these kind of raw materials also within Europe. Today, Europe is extremely import dependent when it comes to raw materials in many ways. But this, I think, has been a wake-up call, not only when it comes to medical equipment and vaccine and those kind of things, but also to other raw materials. That it is quite important to have a resilience within the region.
Thanks very much for that, Maria. And I love this point you made earlier that Europe can actually produce these strategic metals if the investment is there and the demand is there, and it looks like that's the case. This is a very sophisticated audience. The other question we have coming in right now, and I think this is one for you, Maria van der Hoeven, with your experience at the IEA and the work that you're doing with the World Energy Council. There's a huge difference between having access to electricity, and I want to put that light switch on and have it light up, and then having meaningful energy to grow, to prosper, to work in the workforce, to have a prosperous family for the future. That's the gap that's out in the market today, Maria van der Hoeven. And if other panelists want to jump in, it's a vital question.
Yes, it is a vital question, and there really is a gap, because when we look at what SE's Sustainable Energy for All is producing and showing us how things are developing, we can see that there is a certain access to electricity, but that doesn't mean that it's enough to build up an economy. And that's something that we have to bear in mind. And meaningful energy means that it's clean, that it's affordable, and that's accessible. And that's not the case at this moment, not everywhere. There are too many people who just don't have that. And putting that in the center of what after COVID needs to be done, I think, is extremely important. And that means that these 3 billion people we are talking about, which are still having those problems with access and affordability, that they are going to be lifted out of that situation. But that means investing, that means financing arrangements, and that means also an awareness from the rich countries that something needs to be done by them themselves, so by us, the rich countries. And it's about money, it's about technology transfer, and it's also about helping to design the right schemes to see to it that it's not just 3 hours electricity a day, but 24 access to electricity. That's what is meaningful.
Okay, very good. I think, Bob Dudley, I know you're hummed after so many years having you on different panels. You were intrigued by that question, right? Because it's not just be able to have access to lights, but pervasive energy. Is that a fair comment?
Well, that's right. I think energy at its very essence is there to provide heat, light, and mobility at scale across the world. And there are places that are struggling with even just the lights. But there's many parts of the world with affordable energy at scale can create growth and jobs. And many countries around the world, Africa, parts of India, I mean, we need this energy in there to actually create quality of life that's different. And how we distribute electricity and power and other fuels is just so vital to solving this. It's not an issue really in North America or Europe, Scandinavia. But we often center our comments and our thoughts around Europe and North America. We've got to think about how to transfer this to people all around the world. And there's resistance of using some of these fuels in parts of these, but these countries need growth and jobs more than just electricity to light a school and a refrigerator. They need energy at scale. We've got to help in those solutions.
Okay, very quickly to the panel, I want to mix this up as a final question to you. We only have about 3 to 3.5 minutes here. Can you have both, Bob Dudley, and then I'm going to call in the other panelists. Can you have the targets hit on the Paris Climate Agreement and have that energy for humanity that we're talking about? Bob Dudley first, but let's keep our answers pretty tight. Thanks.
Thanks, John, and thanks. And I really like the comments by all the other panel members on many of these questions. Yes, we can. We have to stop talking about it and issuing proclamations, sometimes overly simplified, and get on with real projects, start locally. World Energy Council linking up cities and towns and getting the middle class involved with it is going to be vital, but we've actually got to take our words now and get in action. And I'm hopeful that coming out of COP26, we'll see some specific actions by at least a broad set of countries.
Okay, Maria van der Hoeven, I know there's a worry about a cop out at COP26, and I don't mean to be cute because it is such a vital meeting, particularly after what we've seen in 2021 with flooding and the fires raging and droughts all over the world, and now we have energy shortages. Can you have both?
We have to. We have to. And we have to stop saying but, because with saying but, we always think but there are problems. We have to do this. We have to see to it that we bring together the financing that is needed. And it's right. When we look at COP26, it's a pivotal year for the Sustainable Development Goals for number 7. It's a pivotal year for sustainable energy for all. But it's also about ambitions. It's about money. It's about finding the right approaches. And so I think it's absolutely important to invest in that, invest in all these finances that are needed to achieve the Social Development Goal number 7, because that is what is the heart of the matter.
Okay. You saw that cloud filling up with the key messages that you all have put out here. We've had absolutely fantastic questions coming from the audience and literally from every corner of the world. Maria Fleming, I posed the question here, can you have it both ways here? And what is the role? Bob talked about, we put this in the context of the United States and Europe, but this is where the cash is. ESG reforms kind of influencing investment, but what's the role of the developed world in making sure you can have both hit the COP26 targets and also provide energy? Should it be more aggressive with the investments?
I mean, I think for sure we need to be more aggressive with the investments. We need to have access to clean energy on a global scale, of course. Otherwise, this won't be possible to achieve the climate targets. So, I mean, the meeting here, the COP26, is extremely important when it comes to discussions around how to actually fund this transition and how to make it happen. So, extremely important, yes.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to finish on His Excellency Juan Carlos Jobet. who's provided great insight as both of a producer of strategic minerals and metals, of course, and you have your own energy transition underway. Give us the example of a developing world, but Chile is a little bit unusual because it's so far up in terms of middle-class income in your country right now. Can you have both? Can you confident that the world's going to rally here and you can still meet the needs of a growing economy, a growing continent?
Yes, I think we can do that, and we must, as Maria said. And the good thing is that there are two things that are in favor of us. One is natural resources, right? So the abundance of solar and wind potential we have all over the world, it's enormous, right? And we need to harvest that in an efficient way. And the second thing is technology, right? Today, with the advance of technology, we can have both very abundant energy that is clean, but also that is cheaper than fossil fuels, right? And that combination is something that has become true in the last 5 to 10 years, right? That is an enormous opportunity. We need to work on the transition. That's going to be complicated. We're going to face trade-offs, as Bob said, but I think all the stars are aligning themselves, investors, consumers, voters, governments, companies, and I think the only thing we don't have enough, I think it's time. But if we are able to work together, I think we would be able to take that combination of renewable resources, technology, and will from different parties to make this happen.
Okay, Minister Jobet, just very quickly in 30 seconds, are you kind of disappointed that President Biden of the United States has put forward this kind of green investment fund for everybody to jump in, and like the COVAX challenge of trying to get vaccines around the world, we don't see the developed world willing to put money into this transition in the developing world. Minister Jobet.
Well, that's a complicated question. I don't want to get into trouble, but I think we all agree that without the developed world that has, we have to be honest, has created a big chunk of the problem, right, of climate change. Without the developed world giving a hand to the developing world, we would not be able to be successful on time. That's the truth. And so we need to be all very clear and very vocal about that, because we need to open the opportunity for development for poor people in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America. And the developed world must help them do that, which is what they did during the last century for their own people. So we need to kind of make that happen. And we don't have much time to make it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, particularly for somebody from your generation. I'm sure you have a very different perspective than many others in the industry today. What a fantastic panel. What terrific contributions coming from our audience. I'm not very surprised, having been involved with the World Energy Council in the past. We're at World Energy Week, and we're using the hashtags you can see on the screen here, humanizing energy and World Energy Week. I wanted to thank Bob Dudley joining us from the United States, Maria Suner-Fleming joining us from Sweden, from the Netherlands, Maria van der Hoeven. Always a pleasure. Maria, we appreciate your insights here when it comes to humanizing energy, of course, and His Excellency Minister Juan Carlos Jobet, the Minister of Energy from Chile. Thanks again. We're going to be coming back in just over 10 minutes with regional perspectives, decarbonization, as I talked about 30 minutes ago, the Latin America reality, which Minister Jobet talked about, but we're going to spend a whole session looking at Latin America. Thanks again.